Hello and welcome to our session on new Brazilian hybridities. This is part of a series that we've kicked off this year of bringing together talented architects and designers from across the world and getting a glimpse of what's going on around the world. That we call it hybridities because often many people have been studying or teaching or interacting at the centers like New York, London, and so on, and have then gone back to their own countries and producing extraordinary work. I'm delighted to have Anne here today to host our session. Anne and Franklin were teaching at the AA years ago, and when I was there, and I bumped into them on Zoom, as it were, just a few months ago when they were hosting the AA Visiting School in Sao Paulo. And one thing I would say about the AA community, it's a bit like the Digital Futures community. You can go anywhere in the world, you can meet people who have been somehow from that community. It's like a diaspora across the world. So for me, this is a very special session. I come from the country that invented football, soccer, and Brazilians are known as those who turned it into an art form. And from the context of the UK, we look at Brazil, we see the astonishing talent there, the amazing carnivals, the talented architects, the vibrancy of Brazilian life. And it seems astonishingly inspirational. We love it. The only problem we have is that the Brazilian football team is not winning matches it used to in the past. They get knocked out of these tournaments. But nonetheless, I remain a big fan of Brazil. I've never been to Brazil, but it's the one country in the world I would love to go to at some point. So anyway, Anne, it's great to see you again, and thank you for bringing together this panel of presenters. I'm really looking forward to this session. I'm going to hand straight over to you, and I'll come back with some questions after the presentations. Thanks so much, Anne. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you for the introduction. And thank you so much for inviting me to host this panel of these emerging talents in Brazil. And inspired by your second edition of your book, Architecture in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, as well as the visiting school workshop that we did last July 2024 with Carlos Bagnon, and the workshop that we'll be doing this July with Hassan Hajab. We thought it'd be interesting to invite four architects in Brazil that are working with artificial intelligence and really explore how each of them are working with the concept of being critical about the context of Brazil, and inspired by the works of Hassan, how working with AI can enable an expression of authentic cultural identity. And so I think each architect here does this in different ways, whereas potentially a year or 2 years ago when everyone was starting to experiment with AI, and you've commented on this too, Neil, is that there was a sort of bias in the references that were coming from the Northern Hemisphere. And in the Southern Hemisphere, we're kind of struggling a bit with what was arriving in when we were putting in prompts. And I think what's amazing, what's happening now is the ability that these architects have to code, to work with LORAs, with teaching the artificial intelligence systems to really be more site specific, or to really think about what context is, and to be a bit more critical, where instead of context being something just vernacular and superficial, it really starts to become generative. Let's see. So we'll start the first presentation with Marcella Carone. I think her work embodies this idea of critical contextuality. Some of the explorations that she's been doing really capture the idea of contextual references and how to make it generative and to create new hybrid fusions rather than something that's just a repetition of the past. Marcella Carone is an architect, computation designer, and a postgraduate professor now. Her work integrates algorithm design, evolutionary optimization, and artificial intelligence, as well as digital fabrication. She holds a master's from MTech, the Emerging Technologies program at the Architectural Association. She also received her bachelor degree from Mackenzie University, where she is now a professor, teaching two interesting postgraduate programs. On one hand, architecture, city, and real estate, and the other program, parametric architecture. And I find it fascinating how she, through her architectural experience and her educational experience kind of brings these two worlds together. She also has worked, as mentioned quickly, that like in 10 years in different architecture offices here in Brazil, able to incorporate parametric design, creating this one of these amazing towers that is on Avenida Raposa. So Neil, you must come visit us in Brazil because you can see some of the work that's being created now, not just sort of small experiments of actual buildings using, you know, parametric design and work that in research that has been done over the last 10, 20 years through the in the academic sessions. She's now specifically a Lato Senso professor at Mackenzie University. She participated in our workshop last year as a partner tutor. She also is an invited lecturer at Belas Artes University here, PUC Campinas, Mackenzie, and has lectured and spoken with architects Michael Colgan, Arthur Casas, and Decameron Design about AI. Marcella, we're excited to see your presentation. I'll stop sharing and you on.
And thank you so much. And thank you so much for inviting me. Let me share here. Can you see the presentation? Yes, thank you so much. And for inviting me, thank you so much, Neil and Digital Futures, for the space to talk. For me, you are always that like an amazing reference, like for learning our architecture. And it's a pleasure to me to present this work together with professionals that I really admire. So I'm going to present diffusion architecture, so some AI-driven approach for architecture, urbanism, and design. So, yeah, and introduced me really well. So my work is in the intersection of architecture, urbanism, design, and technology. As Anne said, I work with architecture, with building designs, and focus on feasibility studies. And I teach in urbanism as well, focus on urban code and urban morphology, but in like a multi-scale object design as well. So today you're going to see buildings and you're going to see like objects. And like since the university, I was always related to technology, to modeling and rendering. And after the AA, like 10 years ago, like the most part of my time is related to algorithm design, evolutionary computation, environmental analysis, digital fabrication. And in this presentation, I'm going to show like this little part of AI that I'm working like from the past years and related to diffusion models. So first, like I think many of you that are seeing us, you don't know what a diffusion model is. So basically, like really simple way to explain like diffusion model, you add noise to a media. It could be an audio, it could be an image or a video. And then you take this noise out, you denoise it to generate new media through this. So this is what I'm doing from the past 3 years. And I'm going to show you one of the first images that I got in Midjourney. This was back 2022, beginning of 23. And it was a really hot day in Brazil, in São Paulo especially. And I was thinking, why, like, if we have some water slides in Avenida Paulista, like super utopic thinking, but it was my first time that I could put my imagination on an image. And imagine is the main command on Midjourney. So this was, of course, I was playing with it, but it showed me that those models were super powerful for me to use during, like, in my workflow in architecture. And for me, it was not just like a random image, but how to translate like a combination of my references as well. And for me, it was like a normal path to go to ComfUI and to work not just like with my prompts and images, but with ControlNet, those images that you can see on the left. So here I was using mask photography, and I could extract some data from it for some of the lines and the depth. And this is segmentation that it's what means which color is one of the parts, like this is a building, this is a sky. and I could generate images and thoughts on top of a existing image. In this moment, I was super apocalyptical. As you can see, I was thinking in the world after the humans. So how São Paulo is going to be after humans? Like, this is MASP in Avenida Paulista from Lina Bobardi. And I was playing with this in a series of important buildings in São Paulo. Oca from Niemeyer, this is an internal view. And in this point, I was really concerned because I like Oca is an existing building. I cannot change the railings, I cannot change the proportions. So ComfUI was my way to do and to express myself doing this. And this is my photograph. I went there to Sesc Pompeii, I took this picture, and I tried to modify on top. So always related to the context. And the end of last year, I started thinking, like, how can I express myself through those images and videos? So Sesc Pompeii is built on an area that used to be a river, and it's an area that floats today. So those red tubes on top, they are for ventilation. But I was thinking, why if water comes through them, like the rivers want to come to the surface? And I start building some of those images and videos. And I was really, really focused on how to get consistency, because I know that consistency is a difficult thing to do at AI if you work with like single images. So how to do with this? And it was really nice for me because I was using ComfUI and ControlNet that I can extract information for the photos, but I can draw those maps as well. So I was drawing like where the water needs to be for me to kind of render it and have the video. But at some point last year, I was thinking, can I really design with AI? Like in that moment, I was just working on top of another images and trying to express myself, understanding the tools. But I was thinking, can I design something like not just ideas, but can it can be true, like going from the digital to the physical world? And I was thinking like 100 contests related to Brazil, specifically São Paulo, to work with cobogós. Cobogós are those hollow bricks that came from the Arabic word musharabis and came to Brazil in the 30s, an element that was spread during the 40s and the 50s, but it's not like no one is using a lot more, and is an element that is totally adaptable to our climate. So the first point was, okay, I need to type this, I need to prompt this. And those models in that moment, they are not trained to Brazilian context at all. I cannot type cobogó. I cannot do this, and even with the bias and the stereotypes that it comes from. So how to pass this barrier and be critical to every point to get those images and to get this element working. So a point for me doing this is like, I don't want to do a generic image at all. It needs to be a project. So as you can see here, I can control everything. I can control the angle, the colors, the vegetation, the floor, everything. It's controlled, but I let the machine play just with the cobogó design. So can I have like a cobogó drawing by like in a hybrid way from the machine and me? And I started working with these like internal images and thinking about those drawings and if they are possible or not, just my imagination I can grow on top of those designs. And a specific point for me is that I don't want to be just images. Okay, I was working with images to have ideas and to work with this, but I want to have a project. So I got those images and I got the depth to create these models. And this was Rhino, okay, to get the model printed in my hand. It's like going to digital to physical to get the project in my hand. And through this, I start thinking on those projects in a multi-scale. So as Anne said, like I work a lot with building design. So why don't we go to this design to another scale and try this using urban code, like the urban code from São Paulo. And even experimenting this. This was my work with the stacking bricks. I was trying to stack bricks in different compositions. And there is a thing about AI that I truly love, that is the hallucination. So it's an aesthetics that you can get from AI. And for me, it's amazing to work with this, to have new ideas. And I don't want to be perfect. I'm not following here like a render. I just want to have ideas. And in this case, I was interpolating images, okay? And like this is one of my last projects that I'm working on. It's a kobogo. So I was thinking to work in a kobogo with some layers. Like if you put layers one on top of another, what I can get different sides. And there is a thing about AI that AI is bottom up for me. Like I'm from São Paulo. I study architecture in São Paulo, and Escola Paulista, like Paulista School, as we call here, it's extremely top down. So I was trained to be top down. Even when I was at AA, I was struggling so much to understand what the bottom up process is, and like for me, working with AI, it's working with the bottom-up process. So I can give some commands. I can put my ideas and my references here. They are not generic, but I'm not 100% controlling the design. I can get ideas from it. So this started to evolving for me, and got back to Rhino in a more traditional way to understand like how those elements can be combined, where I can get openings and closings, and to have like a super straightforward algorithm, so I can design and I can see 3D real time at the same, like real time 3D. So I have you can see the red lines and the green lines. So I was drawing the front and the back at the same time to get 3D real time of my kobogos, even seeing like the percentage of the openings and everything. So I could get a range of different designs and combinations. And I'm going to show you here, like I have the prototypes. So this is working in progress, but I have the prototypes. I have many of them. They are in scale here. But there is one thing related to this for me that I can touch the design. It's not just an image. So I can evolve from it and really work on it. So I'm going to get just this middle one, 35% opening. So I can go even further. I can have solar analysis of it. I can really test this material digitally. So to understand the incident radiation of the material, the luminous performance related to, in this case, São Paulo climate. So I can see that I can reduce in 3 times the incident radiation, but at the same time, I can have the light comes through it. So it's a powerful element. And for me, I was thinking in a novel way to do it. And for me, this workflow process of AI, it's fascinating because it's not, it comes from the beginning to the end, but it's like a dialogue between me and the machine. So all the time we are talking, and when I got the design, I put it back at AI to have the lines, and this was Rhino, and to get in the real project. So I can express myself, and it wasn't super fast workflow. This is really good to say, actually, because people think that it's super fast. Okay, it's super fast if you have the workflow. But I was trying to put in my original workflow of a creation as well, being like hybrid creative. And that's it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Marcella. So I'm going to share the screen now back on my presentation. Hi, is everyone seeing the slide I have here? Okay, great. Thank you, Marcella. A fascinating presentation. The next presenter will be Victor Sardenberg, who is an architect, a researcher, and he's practice and research focused on architectural experimentation, parametric design, computational aesthetics, robotic fabrication, and artificial intelligence. His recent PhD thesis, for which he received summa cum laude at the Leibniz Universität in Hanover, developed, and I will read this, a computational framework for predicting aesthetic preferences using computer vision and artificial neural networks. So we're fascinating, and we saw a little bit of it last year at the workshop where Victor was also a tutor and has been for the last 14 years at our architectural ADA visiting school workshops. But he's now a professor at the University of Mackenzie, and he currently postdoc researcher there as well as a visiting professor at PUC Minas and a lecturer at the Detmolder Schule for Gestaltung, sorry for my German, but we're very fascinating how this issue of aesthetics is a certain cultural construct. Is there a sort of contextuality one can be critical with in looking at the preferences in a given community that define aesthetics? So we're interested to hear about your presentation. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Anne, for the invitation. Beautiful introduction. Thank you very much, Neil, for organizing this beautiful event. So I will share my screen. And yeah, so I prepared something special today for this event, which is firsthand. It's still work in progress. But I think it's a nice opportunity to share with my colleagues. And I'm very eager to discuss it later with everyone. So in the last few years, I've been researching aesthetics, which is a very beautiful and polemical topic, especially combined with computation. So some people are very excited about it. Some people are very uncomfortable with it, let's say. And so I'm interested in exploring aesthetic sensibilities in architecture, and I've been doing so using computational methods like computer vision and artificial networks to produce cartographies of possible aesthetics. And this interest started to me because in the last decades, it became very fast and cheap for architects to produce hundreds and thousands of variations of designs. And then the question arises, how do you choose among all these almost infinite options? So traditionally, architects have been using quantitative methods to rank designs and navigate this design space of all possible solutions. And if you fit the existing criteria to the good and old Vitruvian triad, you can see that all of them, or most of them, fit into firmitas, which is related to structure, or utilitas, which is related to the use of a building. However, there is a very important question, which is in the core of architecture as practice and as discipline, which is how something or an environment is perceived by its users, which is related to Venustas, that is aesthetics, how we perceive the world. So it's necessary to develop methods to quantify aesthetic preference. There's a long tradition of people trying to do it into something that is called empirical and quantitative aesthetics, from Fechner, a German physician from the mid-19th century, until nowadays. Someone that is especially interesting for me is Birkhoff, who in 1933 developed the first formula to quantify and compare aesthetic objects like poetry, music, and objects. And nowadays, there's a resurfacing interest in aesthetics that emerged from the combination of contemporary computational techniques applied to visual perception in a new field that is called computational aesthetics. So here's a nice definition. Computational aesthetics is the research of computational methods that can make applicable aesthetic decisions in a similar fashion as humans can. So here is an application of many computational methods into a large database of architectural images. So it's applied to AVA, which means Aesthetic Visual Analysis Dataset. It has 255,000 images, and it's a very good dataset because it also contains the aesthetic score, or how people like or dislike each image. For architecture specifically is 16,000. So here are some of my methods, or some computational aesthetics methods applied to this dataset, like compression complexity, the brightness, the fractal dimension of the image, the depth of it, the number of parts, their connections. And on the bottom, there is a neural network that I trained that is called the predicted hedonic response model. So this model, it's a large neural network that use as inputs some computer vision or computational aesthetic methods like brightness, depth, fractal dimension, number of parts and connections. And in the output of it, there is a predicted hedonic response. So a hedonic response is a response of liking or disliking something. So this neural network is able to predict how people like or dislike architectural images. And it's pretty accurate for something that is not completely objective and not completely subjective. People tend to prefer things in similar ways. So on the vertical axis, you can see the predicted output of the model. And in the horizontal axis, you can see the real output for each image. Ideally, it would be a perfect diagonal, so the model would predict perfectly. But here you can see that it's mostly diagonal. So it's accurate enough for my intent. And my intent is not to perfectly find how people prefer, but to be able to compare designs and to map it in a map that I call latent map. So I use all these 14 criteria, and I use PCA, which is an analytical method to flatten 14 dimensions in 3D and 2D. So this is a map that cluster images that are similar and move away images that are dissimilar. These are 600 perspective images for the competition for the new headquarters of São Paulo government in Brazil. And it forms a very large cluster in the center, but there are in the periphery some different designs. Here is a different visualization that put all images in a grid, but still organize them according to their aesthetics. So this is a way to understand the different aesthetics that are being applied in a design space, for example, in this case, a competition. But something that I realize is that this large cluster in the center, it is formed because most of the images being submitted to this competition have the same aesthetics. These are the 6 finalists of the competition. And you can see that although the designs are very different, the aesthetics of the image, they are all very similar. they all belong to the aesthetic category of the beautiful. It's always this beautiful green grass, this very nice blue sky, some happy people, there is some specific brightness, specific camera composition. So it made me feel like in other aesthetic practice or other arts, like movies, if you go to the cinema, you can see that there are many genres of movies, from horror to comedy, from antique movies to sci-fi, from tragic to comic. Or if you look at music, you have from heavy metal to bossa nova, from drum and bass to minimal, there are many different aesthetics. But it feels like architecture, especially in the mainstream, have been producing only one aesthetic category, which is the beautiful. And I suspect that it happens also because software for rendering, they come with templates of this kind of image, the beautiful photorealistic image. And it pushed towards this direction of the beautiful. So I started to research the following question. Can the current AI models explore aesthetic categories beyond the beautiful? So in the last AA workshop here in São Paulo in July, I had the opportunity to learn better Stable Diffusion and Comfy UI, and I start to apply it in this research. So this is one of the images from this competition. This is designed by Mako Architects. And I extract the depth of this image and the lines that define the composition. And I start to ask, can you make a beautiful version of this foyer? Can you make it comic, or what it looks like if it's a cool foyer, or a cute foyer, or a glamorous one, a grotesque one, an interesting one, a kitsch one, a maximalist or minimalist. Here is a picturesque, here is quaint, sublime, surreal, tragic, ugly, and finally zany. So as you can see, the AI model is able to produce these existing categories that are popular, or not so popular, in other fields, but not in architecture. So I apply my own methods again to this database of generated images to again produce two things. The first one is that with quantitative analysis, I can make a quantitative comparison between aesthetic categories. But for me, most interesting is that I can produce this map of aesthetic categories. So here is this grid that plays side by side all these different designs. And here is how they are clustered in this 3D cloud of images that you can navigate to explore. And you can see that some regions of this map are very well populated and other regions are less populated. And this is what I think it's more interesting in this map, is not to check the regions that are full of images, because these regions are populated by images that have the aesthetic categories that we are already familiar, like the sublime, the grotesque, the beautiful. But there's also many regions that are empty. And this is the next step of my research. How can I populate and find new aesthetics, new sensibilities that are unique for our time. And I think this is especially interesting to do with artificial intelligence because it becomes an act of co-creativity. I'm creating together with the model. And it's possible to produce new aesthetics that are synthetic aesthetics that we still have no names for that. We still don't know how it looked like. So the next step is to find this new, uneasy, unexpected, maybe uncomfortable, new synthetic aesthetics. So thank you very much. And I'm very excited to continue the conversation with you all and to listen to all colleagues' presentations.
Thank you, Victor, for that incredible research. It was really fascinating, especially where it's gone since last year. So you've continued on with the research of your PhD, so it's amazing. Thank you. The next speaker will be Alexandre Kuroda, who's the founder partner of ArcGen. He holds a master's degree from the DRL, the Digital Research Laboratory at the Architectural Association, where afterwards he worked for Zaha Hadid, working on parametric design on these amazing facade systems and structural systems for her buildings. And he also worked for KV Arquitectos. He was a professor, an undergraduate and postgraduate professor at the Belas Artes, the Faculty of Architecture, Belas Artes. Actually, I think you founded the amazing new master's program there that was focusing on parametric design. And he's been a speaker at events such as XSW, the Bartlett, and KEA. In ArcGen, I think it's a fascinating practice that she's created that uses, establishes a certain critical contextuality in transforming static urban planning regulations and interior area requirements to create this dynamic form generative process. So we're excited to hear more about your work, Alex. I'll stop sharing and share on to you.
Lovely. Well, nice to meet you all. Let me just share my screen here first. Can you all see my screen? So yeah, I'm Alex, the co-founder of ArcGen. I want to start here by thanking Anne and Neil for the invitation. It's always an honor to be here at the Digital Futures. This is our second time here, and it is a complete delight to discuss technology in architecture. That's the soul of our business, baby. And nice to meet you all, these colleagues, Marcella and Victor, and everybody here. Well, ArcGen is a construct tech, or better, a deep tech, since we developed software. ArcGen is completing 5 years this year. So yeah, I think we not doomed to fail yet. Well, I want to start this presentation by presenting something that we architects, we already know. We architects traditionally solve everything on try and errors. All of this to test all of our intentions for the projects in plans, sections, and elevations, perspectives. At the same time, complying with all the accessibility, urban and environmental restrictions. We grill our minds thinking and drawing by hand or digitally in AutoCAD or BIM. So traditional architectural services are very manual, inaccurate, bureaucratic, and slow. This is a colossal problem for retail and real estate companies that need these projects with speed and quality to meet their business demand. That's why we automate architecture and urbanism design, custom made to our clients via AI and generative design algorithms that we developed here with our team. We've got two main solutions for our clients. The first, the Viabiliza layouts that came to light from the pain of approving architectural layouts. And this is how it works. It all begins by importing the building survey and then defining the design style and the architectural program. That is, for example, for a bank branch, the quantity of managers, the back office furnitures, waiting chairs, and then in one click, launching our solution that conceives all the possible layouts for these projects, for the sites. All the design options are presented and ranked according to the client's criteria, complemented with all the metrics needed for the users to make always the best possible choice, and exporting the selection in PDF, AutoCAD, or BIM. Our software is agnostic. We integrate with the main applications used in the market. Revit for this client, that means beyond all the benefits of the BIM model, it is obviously a 3D model that allows for an easier comprehension of the design presented, and also including the automatic generation of the drawing sheets with plans, tables, and dimensions, and therefore delivering the projects in a complete schematic design stage. One of our clients have reported a approval time reduction from months to less than a day, an increase in the quantity of design options for more than 10, while, as we know, a traditional architect will deliver up to 2 to 3 options and will charge if you ask for more, because obviously it demands a lot of work, and savings of millions due to their more than 4,000 branches here they have here in Brazil alone. Our second solution is Viabiliza Terrenos, that came out of the pain of approving test fees for residential and commercial and warehouse buildings in their plots. It all begins by importing the site survey and then choosing all the urban and environmental restrictions such as setbacks, GFA, GIA, building heights, and the architectural program from our clients. We customize our solution with our clients' characteristics, that is, their apartment, their accesses, amenity areas, car park, and also with one click, starting our solution. Here, our solution positioning residential towers and varying the typical floor. And here in different site conditions. And just like Viabiliza layouts, delivering all the best design options possible. Once the user chooses, he or she downloads the options in the format that he or she works. And one of the Viabiliza Terrenos clients have reported a time reduction from days to few minutes, an increase on design options for more than 5, and also a increasing the scores in 5 points in average compared to the projects already developed with them during the POCs that we have developed with them. This is only possible with our team. Myself, one of the RPGN's co-founders, I'm the Chief of Innovation in the office. I have my master's degrees from the Architectural Associations, from the DRL, as Anne said, and worked at Zaha Hadid and lectured here at the Belas Artes School of Architecture, together with Thomas, my partner, the current CEO. We both graduated here from the Mackenzie University, and where Marcella and Victor also did, where also Thomas got his master's, and a team of 30+ architect developers, computer scientists, AI, sales, and marketing specialists, all of them very passionately committed to overcoming this colossal challenge. We also recognized by our partnerships. We are financially supported by FAPESP for PP Phase 3 and FINEP. We are technically and commercially supported by Autodesk. On the AI tech side by NVIDIA and AWS. And by our investors. We are now 1.5 years into the first round of seed investments. And last but not least, our dear clients, among them Bradesco and Itaú, one of the largest banks here in Brazil, users of the Viabiliza layouts, Cury and Direcional, top-notch real estate companies here in Brazil. And so in short, what we do here is architectural designs by AI, saving related costs and conceiving projects more efficiently. But above all, with the Archigen's missions to return the protagonism to architecture, returning its strategic role and not merely operational. Well, that's it. I hope it could help introducing Archigen. And it will be a pleasure to discuss our work with today's panels further with you all. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alex. Very impressive. I'll just share my screen now. I think, yeah. Great. And so for our final speaker is Mariana Grunschy, who we were introduced to in preparing the Architectural Association Visiting School program. She was potentially going to participate as a student, but we discovered that actually she has a lot of experience using AI. She has over 20 years of experience with architecture, design, and immersive brand experiences with her company, Soma Creative Studio, working with commercial spaces, events, and temporary installations. She has an interesting dual degree in both graphic design and architecture from the Faculty of Architecture of University of Porto in Portugal. And in 2024, she launched Archi-IA is a way of working with AI for various phases of the architecture process. I was particularly fascinated by the way she addressed context, and critically within the Brazilian context, some of her work that she's done with how interior design begins to incorporate the context of, for example, the Amazon, as we see here, and she's worked with different cities like Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo. Mariana, thank you for accepting the invitation, and I'll share the screen with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Good morning. Thank you so much, Anne, for having me here. Also, Neil. I'm sorry, are you seeing my screen in a good way there? No. Hold on. Stop share this one and share the another one. Hold on. This one. Not. Sorry, we just did that in a minutes ago. Present review. Present. Are you seeing my notes also, or just my slides? Okay, I will share in another way. Are you seeing notes? Okay, sorry about that. I don't want to show you my notes, only my presentation. Hold on, please. No, present full view, present. No, that's it. Sure. Now, okay. Now you can't see my notes, right? Right, okay, that's it. So thank you, Anne, for having me here. Thank you, Neil, also. So I feel a little bit different from the other participants because I'm not in academic path. I'm more about entrepreneur path. I'm a creative architect, and I have my own studio for about 12 years. So when I decided to begin to use AI and started to study it, that's because I need more time and I need to potential my creativity. So that's why I began to study AI and use it in my own work. And also, and present me very well. And I'm architect, creative direction, and also now I am also an AI educator. And what I teach to my students is not is that AI is not only about creating images, and it's not only about technology. It's about having more time. And that's my main goal, is to give architects in the field to have more time, and more time to begin to focus in what really matters to them. It can be having more human connection to their clients, more human connection with their own co-workers, and that's what I teach my students. That's some of my work here in Florianópolis, in Brazil. I do a lot of commercial spaces and immersive projects, and they are all, and they need to be very fast to make them to my clients, and I need to be very creative. So that's why I began to use AI. And then I discovered I can use AI in my whole work, from the briefing to the executive project, and also inside the management of my office. And that's also what I teach my students. So artificial intelligence it's equal more time and more human connection to me. So because we know in Brazil and in a lot of countries also, we are not just architects. When we have our offices, we are also have to do other things like manage the office, also go to the building area, also make some financial studies about the buildings. And that's why AI came into my life, to give me more fast ways to deliver my work. Sorry, my English not so good today. So that back in 2004, I started to do an Amazon AI series, and I would like to present Brazilian architecture inside the nature, and different from another images I was seeing back that time. I was not seeing a lot of ways to show Brazilian architecture. And these houses I did in January last. They are open, very open. They have exposed concrete. They have ceramic. They have indigenous art. I was not able to see that kind of projects in artificial intelligence, because I was only seeing European and American ways of making architecture. These other images. Maybe if I started to do this series again, I can have more accuracy in the images, because we have the technology. The technology started to be more realistic nowadays. But I decided to show the image of that time, because they mean a lot to me, to use the Brazilian nature, the materials we have a lot here in Brazil, the birds and everything else. Oh, sorry. Why is that happening? Why is that happening? Present full screen. Also, I have a more clean kind of image and materials. Like I always like to show human inside my images, because we can have the sense of human touch and also human shape and human size inside the space. These are another kind of images. It's also a critical way to show Brazilian architecture. Birds. And then I started to also do images of high-end architecture in São Paulo, but always bringing nature inside the spaces. I always like to bring nature inside the spaces. I like the brutalism of exposed concrete and design furniture, and that kind of spaces. I think they match really good with nature also inside of it. This is another image inspired in Brazilian architects. This is other image. Another kind of images. This is São Paulo. This is my view of São Paulo. Another one. I always like to use some artwork in my images also. And I see AI, for me, AI is not, as I told before, the way I think about AI is not only about technology, it's about time, it's about human connection. And these images are only a way to share my creativity and my own view of Brazilian architecture and Brazilian spaces. But my way to work with AI is to use AI in this whole fields of architecture, always also using ChatGPT, also using for my text and everything else. Another images over here. 2 images in here. Then I started another series, Brazilian House series, when I like to show, also inspired in Brazilian architects, houses by the beach. I like to show some sculptures with Brazilian rocks too. This makes my imagination. AI, I think for all of us, AI can materialize what we are thinking, what is in our architect's mind. That's also a way I really like to use AI to materialize what I am thinking. So I can put what is in my head in an image. And that was difficult to me, because I'm not I don't like to render images. So when I started to make images, that was great for me to see how the light touches a material, how the light touches the nature. This is another image. Another one. So I try to I try to use my AI work as a kind of critical contextuality and to bring more time and more creative and more human touch to my work day by day. So Brazil, with its diversity and contradiction, is a powerful ground for that. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana. It's beautiful work. Thanks so much for sharing. And I will go back to my work. Right, I will finalize the panel by quickly presenting the work, some more emerging talents in Sao Paulo in Brazil. Some of our students from the Architecture Association Visiting School Sao Paulo programs. As you know, we both, Franklin and I, we both run the visiting school workshops, as well as have a practice, subdivision architecture, and our explorations in our practice and our interests, biases do influence who we invite. We always invite different professors from abroad and to collaborate with some amazing talents here and try to create this hybrid between sort of the technology and ideas coming from different universities around the world with the local context. Here is a quick little image I made before the workshop last year. In the visiting school Sao Paulo workshop was dealing with the polluted River Pinheiros and how to redevelop it. And so I was kind of contexting, kind of referencing some sand dunes of Natal and Jericoacoara in the northeast of Brazil with the exuberance of the colors of Carnival to create these new public pools and beaches and public spaces for the Rio Pinheiros. The work that we do as a practice, subdivision architecture, really fascinated with computation, parametric design, and fabrication. So we have our own factory. So where with computational digital fabrication, we're able to fabricate different projects as a ceiling design, the crew there mounting the project. We do a lot of furniture with wood and fiberglass and different ways of developing things from the very initial script to the actual physical product. And our bias really came from our academic work, whereas the workshops are just 10 days during July. The work or research really developed when we were at the AA as diploma tutors, also teaching as well in New York, in Pratt, in Columbia. But at the AA, we were able to develop a research that really focused on how environmental mediation of different forces of sun, of light, of wind, of sound could have a cultural expression, how we could mediate between culture and environment. So we're able to realize some of these ideas through a built project here in Sao Paulo, the Cobogo. Actually, we called it a Coblogo, blow being the blocks, the concrete blocks. So Coblogo, as Marcella showed in beautifully, is an important Brazilian components that were used to mediate the hot sunlight and to attract the ventilation. So in this project, which Victor worked with us on, we use parametric design to transform these bricks, rotate these bricks to create diffused and indirect lighting systems, as well as ventilation within this building, using this very contextual concrete block, which is ubiquitous here in building, but use a low-tech material with a high-tech system of parametric design, and also testing to find the ideal rotation systems to create the ideal lighting conditions within the space to eliminate or to minimize the use of both artificial lighting as well as air conditioning. And then using, actually for the fabrication process, it was a bit of a high-low. And so we used the parametric design to develop these guides for the different bricks, for the bricklayer to just basically match up to get exactly the same model that we had in the digital model. And have you been exploring different fabrication methods, using nature as a cultural expression in different mediation panels here being sound, here this kind of chandelier, and this acoustic panel that had the use of Brazilian materials of bamboo. So this has been a bias in working with nature and using the amazing nature and vibrancy of Brazil within, I guess, a cultural context for explorations. Last year, as I mentioned earlier, we worked with on the River Pinheiros, and we're privileged and honored to be taught by the lead tutor, Carlos Bagnon, who is an amazing architect working with artificial intelligence, who was able to teach us how to blend with AI issues of context and issues of references for ideas that could improve the situation of the river. And so I will show 4 projects which I think embody this idea of developing a sort of critical contextuality, being able to blend the both references and ideas with the way that the site is working in the context and culture of Brazil. The first is Dora Hausch. She titled her project, Imagining Ancestral Wisdom in Sao Paulo, Artificial Intelligence Against Extinction, looking at the lack of connection systems, the kind of harsh edge conditions of the river. The river is being cleaned. There are some new bike paths. The city is in a mode of improving the system. These kind of different kind of connection systems. So she wanted to develop on these system of bridges and connections with the river by referencing these amazing indigenous tree root fabrications, blending this with some of these gorgeous ceramics that she was already creating herself, the kind of Voronoi patterns in 3D, as well as this crazy tree, Ficus benjamin. I think it's like named fig tree in English, but it's an amazing tree that sort of starts to invade structures and other plants, and it follows the kind of patterns and the context of it's within, and blending all of this in her prompt systems create this gorgeous, intricate, and captivating fusion of landscape, architecture, and infrastructure. So potentially, is it still roots? Is it still plants? Is it inspired by it? Creating bridges, these amazing shading conditions, which is so important in Brazilian public space, and the way that potentially these systems could reach out and then feed themselves through the mangrove type river connection in another bridge. The second project is by Laurent Hust, and he, as we were all sort of captivated when we found out that one of the reasons why the river edge is so harsh, it used to be a winding river and then it was marginalized and create huge freeways along it. But one of the reasons why you can't really build trees and build along there is because they discovered centuries old pipes, layer upon layer of pipe systems underneath these edges. So one cannot build foundations or plant trees. So he was imagining a world where this could be eliminated, that the pipes, the concrete pipes could be reclaimed, repurposed, and take on new life. I was told not to use sound, but I'm going to play it and not talk over it, and hopefully this works. If not, just enjoy the video. That was Laurent. So if Dora's project was really using nature as a critical contextual situation, he was using infrastructure, and it's retaking the river in a new repurposed fashion. The next project by Renata Nascimento took on a kind of more utopic vision of the river one day that potentially could swim in, inspired by La Seine in Paris during the Olympics. So I'll just play her video. Again, sorry about using sound. I will not try to talk over it, but she referenced the river and the presentation that we received from the urban planners that have an idea of creating public spaces, even pools along the river itself, and use the locations that were defined by the city planners to sort of explore how the river can change one day to incorporate public space and swimming. So those of you know that Sao Paulo is not Rio. We have no beach, so this project would be amazing to have. And the final project took on a critical view of the river. Instead of being located sort of in the more upscale financial district, went up the river to the favela panorama and developed these public space pool systems. And what I find quite fascinating about the way he worked was that it started to incorporate the patina and the style, and not instead of these, beautiful, I mean, he's using the kind of Niemeyer-esque concrete systems, but they have the kind of patina and reality of the context which he's working in. Right, so that leads to this summer's or winter here, 2025 workshop. Will be with the super amazing Hassan Hagab, who works really with creating a kind of provocative narrative that works with trying to create an authentic representation of identity, cultural, and within the work that he creates. He entitled the workshop Latent Space Paulista, Architecture Beyond the Intangible, Urban Identity, AI, and Computational Design. This is his City as a Tram work, and I will play the next video without talking over it, but it works and embodies this idea of critical contextuality within the cities in Egypt, where he's from.
إنسان يا إنسان ما أجهلك ما أتفهك في الكون وما أضألك شمس وقمر وسدوم وملايين نجوم وفاكرها يا موهوم مخلوقة لك.
So if you don't know the work of Hassan, I encourage you to look at his Instagram site, ahoba, at HSNRGB, working on developing a kind of intense personal and cultural identity through the work that he's been doing, both in Egypt and as well as in different other sites in Paris, Nouveau, and in New York. And the site that we'll be looking on, this looks like another river, but this is Avenida Paulista. There's the Maspi that Marcella showed earlier. The Avenida Paulista originally was this mansion, tree-lined avenue for the coffee barons in the 1890s. In the 1970s, 80s, it became the kind of financial center, kind of a New York, Manhattan-style avenue with tall buildings. The financial center then moved to the river, some of the buildings you saw in the other images. And this street serves as sort of the kind of cultural center, cultural heart of the city. It's a place for protests and carnival. It almost represents a place for democracy. It's closed on Sunday, becomes this amazing public space. There's a great museum like the Maspi, and it's a space that's in constant negotiation between commerce and cultural institutions, between control and freedom, with these protests from the different parties, and between the physical and the digital, the way that it's represented and what it means in the Brazilian context. So the workshop, and I will
see the marbles in the garden have a sadness in their eyes, and all the birds return to silence.
I was going to talk over the video, but I was instructed not to do so. The workshop will take place from the 11th to the 19th of July. And in Hassan's word, it's within this layered and evolving identity of Avenida Paulista that the workshop will explore the intersection between computation and AI AI-generated digital design, blending parametric modeling and advanced AI tools to create a unique visual language. He questions, how can AI help us navigate an intangible visual identity, one that authentically represents the dynamic vocabulary of the urban environment? By combining site-specific data, AI models, and computational design, participants will explore new ways to interpret and reimagine the city's architectural and cultural fabric.
See the marbles.
And will not try to talk over this video, but play it at the end. The workshop will integrate computational design Grasshopper with AI-generated 2D and 3D content. We'll collect and process site-specific data to inform the visual outputs. We'll experiment with AI tools such as Stable Diffusion, SDFlex, Midjourney, LoRa Training, Kling, Animate Div, Comfy UI, and RenPot to generate dynamic digital interventions. And develop a workflow that merges AI-generated imagery with computational parametric design techniques, and prepare final outputs for projection and display in an exhibition on Avenida Paulista. Our site is there at the bottom, Sao Paulo AA.aaschool.ac.uk with more information. You can also check out our Instagram at AAVS Sao Paulo, and we also publish about the workshop on our architecture site at subdv_architecture. And one of the works that Hassam is most known for is Yasif Architecture Dancer. Right. Thank you so much. And thank you, Neil, again. I look forward to our discussion, and I'll stop sharing now.
Well, thanks, team. That's what I expected. I mean, I expected this to come in, this vibrancy from Brazil, and this kind of plurality of different approaches. I mean, I think the one thing I'd say is that if there is one country in the world that is really truly hybrid, it is surely Brazil itself. And there was some astonishing work there. I mean, what I was left with lots of thoughts about this. I mean, what was interesting was all of you are involved in education, even though some are working mainly in practice. Everyone's somehow involved in education, and we finished off with a very sort of educational thing. And I think almost that is, to my mind, that is the big question right now. Whenever I go to talk about AI, people say, "What about education?" Because what you're dealing with really is, we're educating people for a future. We don't even know quite what that is, and there are lots of challenges when AI can generate images, it can generate essays, and God knows what else. All sorts of challenges, and it's not just simply a question, I don't think, of just adding AI and stirring. This is a comment that Joseph Choma makes. Joseph Choma, who is the director of Florida Atlantic University. Don't just add AI and stir it. You've got to think how AI is going to reconfigure everything. And I think practice itself is going to be kind of radically reconfigured. And we got some glimpses of that. I mean, well, for my research, I've discovered that some people, of course, some practices are just using AI to produce images, but others are using it to really speed up the process. Foster and partners are really looking at that kind of thing, and that approach towards things. Yeah, I also found actually, Anne was kind of like just briefly mentioning your kind of the way that you operate as a practice by having a factory, which I thought was fascinating, because I think what's happening now is that we're getting some kind of new practice emerging, and like Nagami, for example, and if you know the 3D printing company based in Madrid, which is kind of like it is taking on board the whole thing, the design and build the whole thing, and thinking how we can operate in different sort of ways. And one of the things I think about AI is the possibility of maybe taking charge of the whole project and becoming developers. I thought that Louis Barragan was a developer. Could architects not become developers and be in charge of this thing? And then thinking about how you can maybe use AI to engage with the client in new ways. I think there are lots of I think there's lots of architecture that we know as we know it, which is completely up for grabs. And what the future of architecture will be, I don't know, but we've got a few probes, a few explorations about how you can integrate AI into that process. I'm not quite sure where to start with the question, actually, because there's so many different issues that have been raised here. But all the work was beautiful. And I would say that I think that we are in a new stage now where it's beyond fetishizing the technology, and it's really a question of how do we use that technology in an effective way, whether to be critical about things or whether to really enhance the practice. So I don't know, maybe I could just ask that question about education. How do you guys see, what do you see the challenges now in terms of education in an age of AI? I mean, I would say one thing already is that, it's not just AI, it's also what we're doing right now. We are effectively sharing information across the planet. All these Brazilian ideas are kind of permeating elsewhere. But AI itself does put the whole question about education under the microscope in some ways. Just maybe I could ask some questions about how you think education is going to change under AI. It's a general sort of question.
I can start answering.
Yeah.
Hi, Neil. Thank you so much. So I'm giving some workshops now about AI, and I'm just thinking like we need to teach people to be critical and to understand the technical part, because like everyone is using AI, and there is a gap of the technical knowledge about this. So like if you haven't teach the model what a Kobogo is, nothing is going to work. So how can I train this? How can I be like really critical to this? And AI needs to be like an answer as well. Like I need to ask questions. Like I don't need to show like a work because of the AI. I don't care if you draw this. If it's the same for me. Like the same. It's amazing as well. But AI asked more questions for me. I think this is the thing. And in the university, I think there are some people completely against. And I always say, okay, it's better to use and be critical, because I remember when I started to use it, Coffee UI and those models, like back in 2023, all the models were trained with a Zaha Hadid. So if you put a Zaha Hadid, you can get like beautiful drawings. I remember that I have a work that I was changing MASP to Zaha Hadid design, like in a sequence, like more MASP or more Zaha. And in that moment, I made that, and I looked at it and said, okay, this is not related at all to my work. This doesn't mean anything to me. Okay, it's nice to get the control to do this, but this doesn't mean anything. So you need to be critical. So you need to explore those tools a lot. What I'm saying to my students, like explore, do and be critical to each step. And one thing that I think is really nice that we are recording this in 2025, maybe a year ahead, we're going to looking at this and say, okay, we were thinking completely different things. And I like this actually. And I think we need to be really critical, even to the environmental impacts of those models. People are seeing just like a part of it. So how can we really put this in our workflow in a critical way? I think this is the thing.
Yeah, it's how you can kind of use it as a kind of to enhance, to augment one's operations. I think that's the kind of key question. So I was just the first time I personally think that it's not just about images, but I think there's an form of intelligence out there that we need to engage in many different sorts of ways. I'm particularly interested in the kind of the use of ChatGPT and other tools to kind of give us critical feedback. And I think people are using that in a very superficial way right now, but it is a way of kind of extending what we can do and reimagining things. I try and use it to be critical. When I'm writing, I never use it to write with, but I asking it questions the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of say, well, the first time I came across ChatGPT was the day after it had been launched. So the 30th of November 2022 was ChatGPT. The following day, I was watching your national football team in the quarterfinals of the World Cup, right? And I'm a huge supporter of Brazil because it's always flamboyant, it's always beautiful to watch, and I always wanted Brazil to get through to the next round, and you guys were playing Croatia, and you were leading 3-0. I was like, great, Brazil's going through. Then it was 3-3. And then there was a penalty shootout, right? And I'm just blanking on the name of the top Brazilian player. It should come to me in a second.
Neymar.
Sorry?
Neymar.
Neymar, yeah. He was sitting on the ground looking completely disconsolate because he was going to take number 5 penalty. And of course, he never got to take his penalty because they'd already lost before that. And it was interesting because Angelico Ponzio went to ChatGPT and said, who should have taken the first penalty? And it said the best player should have taken the first penalty, right? So, at that point, I thought, holy shit, this thing is going to be incredible. We need to use this to enhance the way that we're operating. And I thought after that was, we could, as architects, we could be asking it, what materials should be using for this building. But then I thought the client could also be asking that same question. So, there is a tool out there that really is, I think it's got to be yet to be fully integrated into how we operate. Maybe I could ask you, Victor, a question, because I was kind of fascinated by your kind of, was it yours was the critique of different aesthetics, right? Was that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, what I think is interesting about this is, I'm constantly trying to ask myself the question, how do we understand what it is to be human in the mirror of AI? And one of the questions I've been looking at is creativity, and how do we understand creativity? But it becomes incredibly complex to the point that almost creativity is a bit like beauty. It's almost like it's in the eye of the beholder. What is creativity? And the big challenge I think that we have as architects is that our clients don't necessarily share the same way of thinking. They're thinking about cost, and we're thinking about design. And frankly, most clients don't really care about design. They're interested in the kind of cost. And I'm just wondering how this tool could be deployed as a way of kind of creating conversation with the client. I remember when I was working at the AA, there were some students who were from my students who'd been at UN Studio, and they were saying the success of UN Studio is to present to the client a diagram. Because the client understands the diagram. They've got no clue about UN Studio designs, but they understand the diagram. And my thinking is that actually it must be a way of getting across all the other forms of intelligence about a building to the client using these tools to get them on board. But to my mind, that's and in the end, if you can present something that makes sense financially, you can get something across. I think what is interesting to my mind is how IKEA is so successful. Not because of the aesthetic. I quite like IKEA furniture, but it's because it's worked out ways of delivering things in a cheap way that people like and so on. And as a result, it's become super sort of popular. So my thinking is if this tool could be harnessed as a way of establishing a kind of a dialogue with the client that really makes sense to the client, that's really the potential of it. I don't know whether aesthetics is going to be an easy thing to solve.
Yeah, I think that's a key question is this one of creativity. And it's very funny to teach AI to students because many times they see it as a kind of a slave, that I have this idea in my mind and I want exactly that. And this is not what you should expect from AI. You should expect it to be a certain kind of game, a certain kind of co-creativity or a hybrid creativity between your ideas and the ideas that the AI model is bringing to you. It's more like a partner than someone that will just do the job for you. And then relating to the possibility of using these tools for clients, I think there's a big potential of customizing specifically for the aesthetics of certain clients. So right now, what I'm doing is that I'm producing an average, which is the median, which is usually not so exciting, unless you try to find the peripheries where you have certain strange aesthetics. But if you apply it and you train your model for one specific client, it's possible to find something that not even the client knows that he or she wants. So it can work as a way to augment and to expand the imagination, not only for us, but also for the clients.
No, I've often thought that it has that potential to be a kind of a prosthesis to the human imagination. But I also think it reconfigures what a designer is, because now you've got this tool that is generating things. And I always think it's a bit like you take the GAN as a model. You've got these two different networks, one the generator producing stuff and one the discriminator judging that thing. And really what's happening is it's just producing more stuff, and we become more a kind of curator that's carefully selecting that stuff. And it does put the role ultimately of taste, of having a good eye, of being able to judge what is good, that really foregrounds that. And I think designers who've really got a good eye, and I always think someone like Nicolas Casas has got a beautiful eye, he always produces beautiful stuff with this, it's going to be a huge advantage. It definitely changes that from an aesthetic point of view, and it shifts it around, and means that people like myself, who are more theorists in the past, can generate stuff and use it to become a sort of designer. But I still think there's a huge mismatch between the way that we think as architects and the client that I think. And I think that tool could be one way of overcoming that divide in some senses. And maybe I can ask you this question. I want to know more about your practice where you're fabricating these things. What was the motivation behind that, and how? I mean, because I've seen the Nagami guys as well. Could you see that becoming more mainstream within architecture, that architects will be moving into this kind of way of operating where you're designing and making and taking charge of the whole thing?
Yeah, I think, potentially the fascination started, when we were studying at, in the end of the 90s, and the kind of onslaught of digital fabrication, and the sort of frustration with the construction industry, and the completely long process of creating a set of drawings that someone else is going to have to interpret incorrectly, and then checking it, how it's wrong, and it's a frustrating process, and I think there is a new architecture. It is a type of architecture to be one's own fabricator and to control the whole process, there's still many different components to it, but to be able to control the detailing, control the way that it's cut, the way that it's sanded, the way that we fabricate using digital fabrication. And it's a way of getting out in the world the ideas that potentially would be impossible to build or impossible to describe to somebody else. And it's fascinating what you say about education, because both we do fabricate our own work, and sometimes people hand us some ideas about some influences or some inspirations that clients were excited about. And in the past, we're like, okay, great, we can, this is something that you saw in a different a reference, a built reference. And now we get images that look super real, but they were developed with AI and impossible to build. We have to completely change the process and reconfigure what the idea to be able to fabricate it. And also, I think what Marcella was observing, sometimes in the academic world, there are a lot of professors that are critical of AI. It's great to produce images, but it lacks a lot of knowledge. It lacks one of the professors last summer was kind of complaining about that the students could create all these images, but had no idea about cultural references, architectural history, structural systems. And so I think what needs to happen is maybe those professors that are teaching history and theory, teaching structures, need to embrace AI and use that to teach to the students. Like, even my own children are using ChatGPT to try to write papers with. And I'm like, the professors, I'm sure they know about it, but I think they need to sit down and be like, listen, how are we going to use ChatGPT? How are we going to ask questions and get critical feedback, and not just use it like, as Victor saying, as a slave, but to kind of work with it. And I think education of all the different parts of the building process and all the different parts of the educational process needs to embrace it, so it becomes relevant to our clients, which are sometimes students, our clients, which are people that are going to pay for a building or for a piece of furniture, that it becomes relevant through using the technology for all the different phases. And so there's not this conflict between, they're just an image maker and I'm here on the historian and I'm so knowledgeable, and you students, you're just stuck in AI and you have no clue. It's like, how you bring the two worlds together is I think how we make education, AI and architecture and structure more relevant to students and clients today.
Yeah, I'm as a theorist myself, but one of the questions I've always had, and I don't know what the answer is why so many history, theory, and criticism people are against technology. I was taught at the University of Cambridge, and Dalibor Vasley, who's a very theoretical designer, would ban the computer from the studio, which of course was a ridiculous thing to happen, because it basically meant that a whole generation of students were unemployable because they couldn't use computers. In practices, you have to engage with these things. You're forced to do that. But often education does have these people. And I'm not saying Dalibor is interesting in many other ways, but you often get these people who studied Le Corbusier 30 years ago and are still talking about the same thing. And what you really need is the capacity to really turn very quickly and adapt to a world that is changing very rapidly. But I personally think that actually that these tools could be used, especially, I think, in some of the domains you wouldn't imagine, like anthropology or archaeology or history, theory, and criticism. These can enhance the way that we talk about things and think about things. I'm totally convinced about that. And it's not just simply that I think we have new theoretical debates emerging to do with neuroscience and computational neuroscience that are informing us anyway, and we can see that happening. But I think these tools could be used anywhere and should be used anywhere. But the resistance is something that I don't understand quite, but it is definitely there in the world of history and theory.
Which is especially funny for history, because all these tools, they are fully based on history of architecture. Like if there was no history of architecture and this huge database of historical events, there would be no way to build these tools.
Yeah.
And I think that's...
Go ahead, sorry. No, I think the way I see history, maybe it's different to the way historians see history. I see history as a history of revolutions. Now, a long time back, I was translating Alberti from Latin into English, and I was working in the computer science department of Cambridge University because I didn't have a laptop. I was using the mainframe computer, right? And I was surrounded by these computational geeks that were just absolutely fascinating. And one thought that came to me as I was working on this is that Alberti would have been absolutely into computation, right? And I'm quite convinced that Brunelleschi would have been absolutely into robotic fabrication. And all these guys, they were revolutionaries. History was not about keeping to tradition, but to see tradition as something that is alive, and dynamic. We're seeing history in the making right now with these tools and things. And I think we need to kind of shift that approach towards to think how we can use these tools creatively for all these areas.
And you also need history and theory to make these tools relevant for design. So if you have no idea of disciplinary problems like how a building touched the ground, how surface produce volume, how is the relation between inside and outside, you cannot really use these tools to innovate.
Yeah.
You need to have an idea of what are the disciplinary problems of architecture in such a way that you can use these tools to invent something that is really original, and you are not just repeating what happened before.
I mean, just in the Renaissance, Leonardo was an artist and a scientist, and why we have this divide, I think, in architectural culture between the kind of cultural history theory people and the technologists. It's not a very, I think it's not a very healthy divide. Sorry.
One thing that I want to add to this talk is a way to understand things. I think one of the powerful things that, I mean, these technologies, I mean, all technologies have in common as well is something that it explores the limits, right? So for this time with AI, I think, I mean, AI is a great tool to explore the limits of, say, it's what we see in LLMs or this image generation. They are kind of a mess up or a kind of average of everything that's put on the internet, you know. So that way is a powerful way to recognize patterns more easier and to have access to them, you know. So, and we talked about creativity here, and creativity, one way of understanding creativity is to know where the limit is and to push forward beyond that, right? So I think one of the possibilities that we see here in real time happening is to have access to all this information, to know the limits, you know, aesthetics limits or the way language works, and to propose new things, you know, like today in today's world, there's a lot of information. It's basically impossible to compute everything at the same time, and AI come very handy in this place, you know. So and coming back to education, this is a very tough question actually, because architecture is art and is also technical. So in one hand, you got to understand how you know, the basics of how to draw, how to build, and everything, and get to the state of art where you can actually make this progress. So, you know, like how I think the question becomes really like how can you do it more profusely, you know, like in education. I think that's the main challenge, to know the basics, and also to get access to these tools, which you can access all the information in the world and make use of it, you know,
Yeah.
like make the next step in the creativity.
I want to hear from the rest of you. Just want to make one comment there. You know, make use of it, you know, rather than deny it. I mean, I think there's a danger that when pocket calculators first came out, people say, no, stop using them. You mustn't use them. And some people are saying, don't use AI. It seems to me that what we need to do is embrace the possibility of AI and explore how we can use it. Now, I teach a theory class on the theory of AI, actually, and I've stopped giving my students essays to write because they can just generate that on ChatGPT. So I'm saying to them, kind of like, use AI as much as you can to make a kind of critical commentary on things. And that question of critical commentary, I think, is very important. And I was stunned this last year when two of my students produced this video, and it was using generative AI. They got hold of an interview between Joe Rogan and Elon Musk, when Elon Musk was more popular than he is now. They got hold of this thing, and they fed into this. They used another app to look at to feed in the manuscript of my book. And what happened is they got Joe Rogan and Elon Musk talking about my book, which was kind of bizarre. But you think, well, if they're doing that now, what is going to happen next year? And this is what we've got to be open to, is a possibility of taking charge of these things and really using them. You know, I think one of the things I'd say is that it's interesting this year that Behnaz Farahi got a post at MIT Media Lab, and she's called her group Critical Matter. And the idea of criticality, of bringing that in to not just fetishize these technologies, but to use them in critical ways. That seems to me the new avenue that we can do. How can we do this, and not just in terms of theory and criticism, but also the whole operation of architecture? How does it transform it? How does it turn it upside down? And to go with the flow and explore that possibility rather than be in denial. So I don't know. whether Marcella wanted to say something about.
Go, Mariana, and then I say it after, okay?
Okay, I want to add something to our talk. Is that I was seeing some talks in Southwest Congress the few days ago, and they was saying something that I really agree. It's a little bit polemical, but I think I can visualize that in the future. That nowadays we have AI, and we have a lot of information, a lot of data. So do we need the specialized professional, as we have a lot of data and AI? Maybe the specialized professional will be extinct, and we who will be the most important professionals? Are the criticals? Are the human viewers? Are the talkers, the innovators, the ones who can actually make a curation on the results of the AI? So I think we as architects, we have a very important paper in this whole new thing, and knowing that the specialized ones are going to be updated. They are not important anymore, because we can have access to data in a very easy way, but we can't have access to critical view, to architecture bases, to creativity, to horizontal knowledge. And that's what I think it can be our future. And I think it connects a lot of what we were talking before. So that's what I have to add.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said that what we need to design is not a building, but our future. I think that's why I'm interested in what Anne's doing in terms of her practice with Franklin, and also, I mean, I mentioned Nagami, Manuel Jimenez Garcia, and Gilles Retsin, both of them coming out of the AA as well. Who've taken on board the fabrication kind of thing, and I think this is really, that's the challenge, to really see this opportunity to rethink things. I mean, I've also was kind of impressed by the strategic vision of Tim Fu. No matter what you think about him as an architect, he's actually managed to carve a niche for himself and define a new kind of practice working with these clients using these tools. And I think the world is changing very rapidly, and we need to be hugely adaptive. And those who can see the opportunities will have huge possibilities in the future. But if we don't do that, we're kind of sleepwalking into oblivion in some ways as a profession. I think we're going to struggle.
Yes. Like what I think is, like, AI is a big realm. It's super big. And what I feel is that we need to be like a multimodal, because we can use this in like our whole workflow. We need to understand how can we deal with the machines. And what I feel is that the workflow of architecture is shifting, because what I was taught in the school is like, okay, you do a mass, and then you do the plans, and then you do like sections, and then you do 3D, and then you're gonna render. Okay, you can have feedback on this, but now we have images and videos and our ideas in the beginning, like even in the hands of the clients. Like, is it good or no? Or can I have ideas from this? This is shifting. And what Mariana was saying about data, for me, it's like really the point, because me using optimization and genetic algorithms from the past 10 years, like, you need to use data to answer your questions. Like, it's truly the bottom up what I was talking about. Like, I can put the parameters and I can have the answers from the computer. So if you design with data since the beginning, you are getting through the best path you can have. Like, you don't have the render in the end, and then you're gonna run solar analysis in the end. Like, you need to redo everything. So what I think is, like, technology and the AI is kind of shifting this. and we need to embrace it. We need to test it. Like, we don't know the answers, many of the answers. So this is one of the things that I'm thinking, even related between education and practice, because there is a huge gap. And how can we bridge this in some way?
Maybe I could ask you a general question. I mean, we've got a group here of very enlightened, very advanced experimental designers. But what's the rest of Brazil like? Is there a huge resistance in Brazil to this? Do these ideas get beyond Sao Paulo and Rio to the provinces? What's the overall reception or view about AI?
Well, I think from I mean, like we've been selling our solution around here in Brazil, and here in Brazil, I think people are very open-minded, and they're kind of very curious about it, and they kind of have that fear of missing out, kind of thing, you know, like, so they're very curious. But yeah, the challenges are enormous. So, like in architecture, there is no actually like good solutions, because like what we see in developments right now for the mainstream in AI related to architecture is mainly focused on images, right? Like we've been seeing here, and images, they are not really, I mean, they are part of the problem. Like, I mean, they're part of the architecture, but it's not all. You know, like, so, you know, and they are really imprecise right now. Like, if you ask these models to produce a floor plan, it will get it wrong. You know, like if you the corridors, they don't make sense, and you know, like so I mean, for images, I think they're being very profusely good at, you know, like understanding what's out there and trying to mix up with the intentions that you have for imagery. But for plans and, you know, like all the technical part of architecture is not really like getting there, right? So that's why we are focusing on these problems here in Archigen. The plans that we are working, that we produce, they have to work. No, like we cannot sell things that doesn't work. We have a responsibility about, under these plans. So, and it's very curious, Neil, because the what we are dealing here as well is the way to communicate on how the plans should work, you know, like with the clients. So when we customize our tools to the clients, you know, like we get very deep into like the house, you know, like the what they value in the project, you know, like the sequence of spaces, and very minor things that we talk about producing architecture, you know, that becomes parameters in the projects. So, and we are now developing a LLM that will make possible for the client to automate, to customize our platform for them by themselves. And this is actually really nice because we're gonna get all the data coming from this interaction, and you know, like in this dialogue about architecture, and that's really like meaningful, because that's the way people talk about architecture and the intentions, you know, like, so there's so many possibilities of understanding architecture through other points of views, you know, like through the way you talk about how you want your building to be, and all the constraints and all the ideas and intentions. And so that's language in architecture, which is not only images. And then you have the images that comes out from that. So I think right now we are in a kind of stage where, you know, the multi agents kind of approach. So I think it's gonna come like with these developments that will take these small parts, and eventually in the future it will come together, you know, like with describing architecture and the images, and that will come really fast. We see the developments going really like in a fast pace. But yeah, and that all coming back to education, like is really a big problem, but because, you know, like we don't know in our technology how it's gonna be in tomorrow, and to prepare students to be in that position is really hard. So yeah, it's a good discussion to be. I think all these possibilities, they have to be on the table, you know, like, and it's critical. It's demanding more and more from the architects, from the students, to be updated, you know, like, and to know these possibilities, and to be more mature in less time, you know, like it's really pressing for that, I think.
Yeah, that's why we have these tutorials where I mean, Carlos Pagnon, who was part of the A Visiting School in Sao Paulo, he's one of about maybe half a dozen people in the world who's completely in charge of these things. I mean, they're changing so rapidly, you know, like this last week, we had Runway Gen 4 came out, Mid-Journey version 7 came out, you know. Things are changing on a daily basis, and how do we keep pace with that? How do architectural educators keep pace with it? Only a few in the world can do that. So that's in some ways why we have to really think about the broader picture. How do we restructure education? You know, the old model. We had we had a session with Sanjay Sama, who's at MIT in charge of open learning, and he said, well, you know, the old model of the professor doesn't make any sense anymore. There's more information on YouTube than any professor knows about. So we have to try and engage with that. When you think that ChatGPT knows 10,000 times more than any of us do, you know, so it's really kind of, there's almost, it's an emergency in some ways. We've really got to be able to be ready to adapt. Now, I don't know what the answer is. I mean, none of us, I think, know what the answer is, but the most important thing is to identify the problem. Because once you can see the problem is a problem, you're not trapped by it. You can start to engage with it. So that's why I was kind of, I'm always left with this kind of question. What do we do about education? Because that seems to be, we're at the front line. We are sending people out into a world, and we've no idea what that world's going to be. All we know, it's not going to be the same as it was before. I think Norman Foster has this comment, I'm not sure it's his, but he always says, the only constant these days is change. And we've got to be ready to adapt to that. Yeah. Yeah. We should maybe try and wrap things up, but it'll go too long today. I just want to say that I'm hoping to bring my book out in Portuguese. They've got the Portuguese language rights. It'd be great to bring it out in Portuguese. So if anyone's got any suggestion, please let me know. Publishers who might be interested. But this is important, I think, in this kind of exchange, because we found out today what an incredible wealth of talent you've got in Brazil, and how you guys are taking your own particular approach towards this technology, and a hugely inventive one. And it's been an incredible session, very inspirational, as one might have expected. But let's keep this discussion going. We've also got this is we've had a lot of Portuguese language sessions, which has been great for those who speak Portuguese. But now the rest of the world can see, by having an English language session, what is happening there, and the extraordinary things that are happening. This is I think we're at a moment of change. We're seeing history in the making, and it's great to see what you guys are doing with these tools. We'll have to get you back in not so long to go and talk about these things again, because things are shifting. Things are shifting. And do you want to finish off with some final comments? But thank you for taking charge of this and curating this and bringing all this talent together.
Yeah, thank you for creating this opportunity to share, and for these amazing emerging talents to describe how they're working with AI, how they're realizing the need to be critical. This discussion has been so fascinating, and I thank you, and exactly, you are the embodiment of what needs to happen in education, that people that usually teach history and theory are engaging in how you described how you have your students, instead of just writing, which is something they'll just copy of ChatGPT, they're using the technology, they're engaging the technology critically, and I think this needs to happen across the board. And it's just fascinating that these issues and these ideas came up within this discussion today. Thank you for raising these questions that make us think about not only how we're using it, how others, how students, how education has a role to use this in a more controlled way. Because right now, when you ask how is the reception of AI, I think there's a euphoria. I mean, at least for the students, so they're just loving it, but then there's resistance among those that have the guardians of knowledge, the professors and they, have to see how to get into it, how we can use it to make their subjects more critical. I guess the only thing we can teach is to always want to learn, to keep trying to keep up with the programs and to keep questioning and being critical. Potentially that's the thing that we need to learn most in education, is just to be critical and always question and always keep wanting to learn. And thank you for inspiring this conversation and reflection.
You've been inspiring us. Maybe I could just make one comment, because I think the idea of being critical, that what came out this in the last few months, we had two Nobel Prize winners. In fact, I mean 3, but two certainly from the UK, Demis Hassabis from AlphaGo and Geoffrey Hinton. Now, Geoffrey Hinton, I don't know if you know this guy, but he was like a real rebel. In the first 50 years of AI, nothing much was happening, partly because computers weren't powerful enough, but also because we were pursuing the wrong approach. They were pursuing symbolic AI, they were trashing neural networks. And Geoffrey Hinton was so stubborn. He thought, no, the answer's got to be trying to understand how the brain operates, and we've got to base it on that. And he kept pushing away at it when it was so out of favor. And then eventually when we got GPUs and suddenly computers became more powerful, and suddenly these neural networks worked. And he's a superhero because he was resistant, he was critical, he was questioning things, and eventually he had the answer. The other person I think is amazing is Demis Hassabis, who was famously was behind the AlphaGo match against Lee Sedol, if you know this game of Go, in 2016. It really changed the world because people suddenly realized that this AI was able to operate at a level we couldn't even understand. We were going to actually do a book called Learning from AlphaGo, because we thought it was more important to learn from AlphaGo than to learn from Las Vegas. And we didn't in the end call it that, but we're going to call it something else. But what was interesting, they said, actually, we're just testing out these ideas in a game of Go, but the idea is to apply these principles to every single discipline. And of course, what happens? They apply it to chemistry with AlphaFold, and they get a Nobel Prize for that. And I guess our question is, well, how do you apply this to architecture? And I think there are already signs that it's going to have a huge impact. Often coming up with unexpected results that no architect would have thought about, but it's kind of presenting them in a certain way. So all I'd say is that, these people were kind of pioneers who were questioning things and challenging things. And, I think our responsibility of educators is to try and encourage our students to do the same, to question and to challenge and to move forward. Because if there's one thing that really, I think, that I've learned from my time in education, it's almost a lesson from the AA. And many of you were at the AA. If you think about the people who were part of that, who were constantly questioning the things, whether you're talking about someone like Rem or Zaha, or you're talking about John Fraser, or all that kind of the kind of archigram group or whatever, that was a kind of place where, in the end, things went elsewhere, but germinate. There was a kind of seedbed, a hothouse of ideas, and I think if we can just keep that going, and it's fabulous to see how that legacy is now taken root in Brazil, and people are taking off in new ways. And one final point I want to say is that what I find interesting about AI is that almost the problem with robotics is that they were too expensive. And in Brazil, I don't know how many robotic arms you've got, but AI is potentially democratizing design. It's not that expensive in some ways. And, I think maybe it's in places like Brazil that we're going to see the real legacy. But thanks so much. Every single presentation today was just fascinating from a different perspective. But collectively, we got a glimpse of a really dynamic future in Brazil, especially as you're all educating others. So thank you so much for being part of this today. Thank you, Anne. Thank you also to the Digital Futures team who are helping out this, Giovanna and everyone else. And let's be back in touch in a year or so to find out what is next happening in Brazil, because it's totally fascinating, and I would love to come and see myself in Brazil if I get the chance. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, team, and thank you, Digital Futures team. Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Oh. Obrigado.
Come visit us here, Neil.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marcella. Thank you, Alexandre.